So the current talk today, Decasting the Caste System, Part 2, and the Indian narratives is what we are trying to bring in. Our esteemed speakers have this website, bharatgyan.com, and this is from that website, what are the things available under their name. Uh, Dr. and Mrs. Hari, their picture is here and they are in our group also. In a second, you'll be able to see them. But giving them a brief introduction, that they are our contemporary, professional, multi-talented couple from Chennai, India, who have dedicated 25 years of their lives for the purpose of Indian civilization, knowledge studies, and its dissemination for Indians and others globally. Frankly, recently I had attended some of their programs, not only in US, but also yesterday or this weekend they spoke, last weekend they spoke in Sweden, not Sweden, in Switzerland. And then a previous time it was in Australia. So they are speaking all over the world. I have been amazed at the variety of areas that they have given their heart and mind, but their singular contribution for which I feel they will be remembered for a long time would be creating what is named as Bharath Gyan. They have deeply studied about 108 different subjects on aspects of the Indian civilization across the millennia, to the present, and even to the future. This provides factual and authentic studies for people with little or a lot of interest in Indian civilization. I feel that all of us belong to this category. While their website, bharatgyan.com, and your YouTube contains a lot of easy to digest material, a much easier way would be to find their books available on Amazon and at other places under the headings of Autobiography of India. I would show you this in a moment. From my personal experience, I tell you, you will not be disappointed. And interestingly, I noted that they have not been biased. They have kept their head level-headed to assess the situation dispassionately, and that is hard to do for a staunch Indian. And let us enjoy the bonanza of their work. I will share for a moment a couple of their websites for the understanding that this is bharatgyan.com, their website, and the audio video available. Keep in mind that they are doing courses at Hindu University of America under the heading of Hindu contribution to the realm of matter or mind. There are two separate courses, and an additional course that they are starting in 2 weeks from now for teens and adults. For teenagers and adults, they can do together that course, which will be to invite the youngsters to enjoy the bounty that is coming up in the words that they can understand. So hopefully many of us can suggest their youngsters at home too. These are the main books, 40 of them, but these are available all on Kindle and then on Amazon under the Bharat brand, Autobiography of India, Future from India, Roots in India, Made in India, Unique to India, and each one of them are under the different sections at the on the Amazon and at their website. So I would strongly suggest people to explore them and get the in-depth idea from these books. We did discuss about the beginning of our understanding of the caste system, that the so-called caste system, how it was a misnomer imposed on by Britishers to some extent and solidified by their actions over the last couple of 100 years. The real original term in Indian language, where jati and varna, where jati is what you are born into by birth, where a luhar, a goldsmith, once you are born in that family, you have an access to that knowledge system in that particular family, and you have a choice then, that is varna, by your own liking. Despite being born on a blacksmith family, you have a choice to become a physician or a priest or what you want to be ultimately over a time. And that is another by choice, varna. Freedom to choose and then move on was the major component of that era, that there was a freedom to choose. It was a very flexible, loosely built, horizontal system where people could migrate from one to another. Yes, many of us may object at the moment that that's not what we have noticed. But let us see where are the root causes for that movement. There was no hierarchy in the system. That is what we emphasized. And frankly, such divisions of labor is natural in all societies. And we will discuss that later on today, how even in the West, in the European system, there was a hierarchy. There was a Mr. Goldsmith and Mr. Blacksmith and so on and so forth. There's a system that equally prevalent there too, which again now is becoming fluid. Such a vibrant and colorful system, what happened to that over a time? The Varna Jati system did not come out of a religious contest, but came out of an innate social need for different roles and their independences. And keep in mind, where a couple of 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, when the society was very different, there was no social system, no social support system, then the people needed to be supported in their own role in their communities, so that they can depend on their livelihood, on their support system from the society. They needed to be a part of a smaller groups, and that is what this Jati system created, where people were very well supported in their own smaller independent system, which we are seeing now that people are getting lost into the world, the so-called. There are pluses and minuses both ways, but a good combination would be people, each one of us have a great support system in our own smaller circles, and then still we are a part of a larger circle. So that is what was the Varna Jati system to begin with, where we later realized and we witnessed some of the ills of the society that we saw. So let me bring in our today's speakers again, Dr. and Mrs. Hari, to show us what happened to this system, how it changed over a time, and what were the root causes of that changes as we witnessed. Dr. Hari, please bring forward, unmute yourself so that we can see you and get a feel from you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pankaj Parekh. On two counts, thank you. One, for introducing us to this group of all your friends in North Carolina, and for us taking part in the second event along with you, the whole group, and also for summarizing in the last few slides so well that what all we discussed in the last session, as well as the various discussions we have had over phone, each one of them. And we always look forward to those discussions with you, because it's sort of mutual. And we have a nice word in our Indian language for mutual. It's called paraspar.
Understand.
Where we exchange. Para, the beyond. So the beyond, actually beyond the oceans, through online, we are exchanging ideas, views, concepts.
It's literally beyond the ocean here in our case, where, and this is the beauty
in our context.
Beauty of the technology, that I don't have to travel for 1 month in the seas as Gandhi did it, to all the way reach to Chennai, which would be interesting experience. But this is a lot easier, where I can have a cup of tea and still exchange. So learning,
as they say, Sat Samandar.
Sat Samandar. That is exactly true. But let us enlighten our all the readers here, so that we understand the mechanics of creation of the so-called Shudra, how it is a misnomer and how it happened to what we were a witness to.
Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Sir. Now, if I can go back to the slide you showed a minute back, 2 points I'd like to sort of draw on, because you have sort of put those 2 slides quite well. We'll talk on the last 2. See the
previous one.
No, the earlier one. Yes.
Yes, this one.
See, the 2 points you so nicely bring out is that among the other points, one is you speak about the idea of no hierarchy. See, this is the fundamental factor. When we say no hierarchy, we'll have to substantiate it. Otherwise, people will not be willing to accept it. Because the concept of hierarchy itself means vertical. You can't have hierarchical when it's horizontal. Whereas the Jati Varna system, actually it's not even Jati Varna, it is Jati Varna Ashrama system is not hierarchical, it's not vertical, whereas it is horizontal and it is a matrix. That is what we have shown in the book, and also we showed the animation last time. It's a matrix, and the matrix is not, matrix obviously has to be horizontal, it's not vertical, because Only hierarchical is vertical. So what happened was when the colonists came here, they took this matrix, three-dimensional matrix, and made it a unidimensional vertical hierarchical. So that is the fundamental difference they did, and that stuck on us. So that's a point you brought out so well. So I wanted to sort of explain the point further. The details are there in our book for all to see. Next point is, you speak about natural in all societies. That's a fact. Across the world, in all societies, these sort of what we call different groups, categories are natural. So we look at 4 slides in 4 different parts of the world about this, and we'll go on to our idea of because this is also a subject of the day. We'll get on from there. So Hema will show you some a couple of slides. So we need to have screen sharing facility. Yeah, just show you a slide from our capsule presentation about how this is actually it's not a phenomena limited to India, but it's something that the world over. So we'll look at the world view. We'll come to India later, but we look at the other 4 places where the old civilizations were. We'll come to India last. We'll go to Persia first. And here, there's a person named Al-Biruni who lived in 1027 CE. That's almost exactly 1000 years ago. And this is what he writes about the Persian emperor then, Ardashir.
And the system that existed in Persia.
In Persia. Actually, the word Persia is again a very anglicized form. It's actually Farsi. See, this is what he writes about the 4 classes of people that were there.
The first class were the knights and princes. The second class, the monks, the fire priests, and the lawyers. The third class, the physicians, astronomers, and other men of science. The fourth class, the husbandsmen and artisans. So here they are very interestingly chosen to group slightly differently. So here they have the knights and princes. So the rulers, the ruling class, royalty as one. The second, they have associated with
knowledge,
fire priests, the rituals. So the monks, the fire priests, and also lawyers.
So people with knowledge that come there.
And
lawyers
then here you have the sciences, and then you have the craftsmen. So this is very interesting.
This is in Persia 1000 years ago. Let's look at Greece. They also have 4 categories. The way we have 4 varna in India, they have 4 categories. Look at this: Kratos, Plutus,
Ergon, and Epistem. So power and authority, wealth, work, and knowledge. I mean, just some slight variation from the Persian version.
But look at this. I'm sure all of you use the word ergonomics for work. So the word comes from here, the Greek word ergon. Look at that. And we also have for epistemology, isn't it? For the root of knowledge. So look at that's also here. So how it's a Greek tradition to have the similarly 4. Next point. And he says this middle class must control the society and must do better than the other 2 classes.
So they very clearly had a concept of hierarchy. So they are having an upper class, a middle class, and the lower class.
So this is what the colonists imposed on India. So European idea was imposed on India, actually. And look at this in Poland, they again speak about this. This is during the Poland Revolution, they speak of the social structure. So it's all a very European idea is what we're getting to see. And the whole detail is there on that.
So there's also similar, Kratos, the wielders of power, and so on.
So it's there across the world is what we have to see.
And we did see earlier about Europe and how we had Saint Aquinas's classification of
the great chain
hierarchy, the great chain.
So this is the vertical concept that was imposed on India. So that's what we want to show, because you brought in that slide so well. So I wanted to explain
just
that.
Just re-emphasize that point. And here how royalty and the social hierarchy, how they both keep interchanging, the religious and the social hierarchy.
And they have at the bottom thieves and pirates and gypsies too. That is interesting.
Yes.
And we'll see how gypsies actually come into existence, not just in India, but all over the world.
And so we go back to India.
Oh, we didn't show you India, sorry.
Look at this. Whereas this is by a German by name.
So we have Bartholomew Ziegenbach, and he writes in his work, Malabarisches Heidentum, about the system that he sees in southern India, especially the Malabar region. And from this, what we can see here, we did see that the Varna and Jati, right? And you so beautifully explained about, you brought in the synopsis of Jati. What does it really give people? What is the security that it gives people? Because Jati is like a trade guild. And that was fundamentally for their social security. It was a knowledge bank, a wealth bank, and a social bank that they could literally bank on for themselves. But if they all anytime chose, they could move out of it and go out and venture as well. So he describes that nobody is as respected as a Vallalar. So they are the farming community, the agriculture community. I think we saw this briefly last time. And look at the number of such jatis he lists here.
Look at he actually calls them Shudra Brahmins. He doesn't call them Shudra, he calls them Shudra Brahmins. And they are the most dignified.
And he says that there is a Vallarar, who are the agriculture, cattle rearing community, many family names. Then there are the Mudaliyar, who occupy official positions in cities and villages. Then for military, then swordsmen and valiant fighters. And there are people who can do anything. I mean, different things. They're very flexible.
Jack of all trades.
And then counselors, soldiery. Now here, this is what I would like to draw your attention. See here, weavers of coarse cotton cloth. So kaikular. Weavers of striped cotton cloth. Shaniyar. Shani is the Tamil word for jute. And shak, shani is the word. Weavers of fine cotton cloth. Shaliyar. And people who have done our Hindu contributions course, they will relate to this word, because this is shali. That means, and it's from this you get the word sari for cloth, shali, shawl.
The English word shawl comes from here.
And we show the connect, how beautifully the connect, the trade, how the shali trade, which happened through the estuaries. So inland trade, all of this happened through various estuaries, reached the ports, and went to Europe.
Our short film is there on the shawl alone. You can see it's in our YouTube channel.
So weavers of fine cloth.
And look at this word, the word number 12.
So
can anybody guess? See, this is literal meaning is people working for royalty, the king. Do you know what is the word that's come out of this in the English language?
Rascal.
Perhaps,
Is that what
yes.
Rascal?
Yes.
Perhaps, yes.
Oh my goodness. That's what so the so-called
This looks
lobbyists,
very,
you
very-
might call it the so-called lobbyists.
Yes, lobbyist, the rascal. Because this word actually, the way it has been spelled in English looks like this. In Tamil, you would call it as Rasa Kol. Rasa, Raja. Raja is Rasa. So the Rasa and Kol is the rule. So he is the one who is working for the ruling power. So
he dispenses the king's orders. So he's the rascal. Look at how these words itself come in English. We would never imagine the English word for it, isn't it?
And so many for military, then glassmakers. Such minute distinction. That means these trades had matured so much. And naturally their guilds, the jatis were also that very mature.
So, I mean,
How many-
basically, say a child born in that particular family, whichever the guild may be, fine. So he's exposed to that particular art right from the childhood. He learns firsthand. So by the time he's a teenage, maybe 12, 15, 17 years, he's expert in that area and contribute and make a living and contribute to the society. And he's happy in that particular category, if it is to his
Absolutely.
liking.
It's hands-on training skill from young age. So they're the best in the field. Look at the number of, so this is not a vertical uni system of caste system of 4. Look at this, 50, 70, 80, 90, 100 castes he's listed out. We can scroll down and more, go on and on. See, so that is a range of caste system. I mean, which were all the jatis. These were all people who worked their guilds. And what happened?
So how did all this get wrecked? That is the fundamental question
for the day.
So if we really look at it, the main mindset that we need to come into is that the traditional system of India was such that it was the villages that supported the cities. So you needed those rascals there who would help bridge the village. And, the king was fundamentally for taxes and for working on the common needs like security and so on. But it was the villages which were self-ruled, self-administered rather, and they dispensed, they collected their monies, kept whatever they needed, and would send only that amount to the king. It was never coming from the king. It went to the king from here.
The key point, what she's saying is it was not a top to bottom administration. It was a bottom to top. Again, look at the contrast system. It was bottom to top.
And therefore, the villages were green and they managed themselves quite well. While the post-British colonial hangover has left us with a with the state where it is the cities and towns that actually are supporting villages today, because all the trade in the villages, because those which were prosperous, where the people were respected because they were sustaining the entire civilization, they have now, their trades have been broken. They have got totally, they become downtrodden. And we will see some of the key ways in which this was managed.
Now, keep in mind that here you are showing this poor looking man with a home and the field. But I think majority of them neither had the field or the home. By the time the Britishers had left, they were out on the streets as the so-called untouchables or many other ways. So it's a big difference compared to, this would be what you're showing on the right side is in a positive case scenario. But I'm sure so many were uprooted from their original guild, jati, or for their own trade, that the trade didn't exist anymore. So let's see what you are bringing out from that perspective.
Look at this.
Give some examples of some of the trades lost and the vastness of it, how it influenced the masses, not individuals or families. But we are talking about now masses, the
civilization itself. The civilization itself. Look at this. This is what triggers the whole thing. The arrival in the port of London of Indian produce in India-built shops created a sensation among the monopolists which could not be exceeded if a hostile fleet had appeared in the Thames. So he's talking about the plight of people, the merchants and the traders and the industrialists in UK, in London, in England, and their worries, their anguish, their angst, fears. Shipbuilders in the port of London took the lead in raising the cry of alarm. They declared that their business was in danger and that the families of all the shipwrights in England were certain to be reduced to starvation. Now, actually, this is, because we are having a very brief talk, we are just jumping straight away into this point. But this is a part of the story of the navigation prowess of the civilization. Now, when not only we were great navigators, because of which our trade flourished, and therefore there was a separate jati, and of course we had the Vaishya community which was doing this trade by navigating, but we had the skill therefore to build the ships, to navigate the ships, and to trade using those ships. Now, with the British, we started also building ships and selling ships. So shipbuilding also became an industry because during this colonization, they needed big seaworthy ships, which was what was the skill of the Indian civilization. So we started building all their ships for them. So some of the naval fleet of Britain, most of the ships initially were all built from India. So when these huge ships started bringing in more goods, so during colonization, the avariciousness was bringing in more goods into the British ports than was being done through regular trade before. And therefore, the people in Britain started raising hue and cry You can see how there were proclamations that were published. So the British, they published in the Calcutta Gazette a prohibition for building Indian ships for overseas trading. So first thing they are doing is they are preventing Indian shipbuilding industry. The people who used to build ships, they are clamping down on them. So no more building Indian ships. So that is what is coming here. So the overseas trade was slowly decimated. What happened? No, the mariners were destroyed. So in 1817, they introduced the Shipping Act, which said no ship could employ Indian mariners which did not have 75% British mariners. So in a ship, it was mandated by the British that 75% had to be British and only 25% Indians. No ship, even British ship, could enter London which had not aboard 3/4 of its crew of British mariners. So with this act, the Indian mariners were made jobless. So they destroyed the shipbuilders, they destroyed the people who could navigate the ships.
Seas. So look at this. So two jatis were destroyed by one act.
Then further, look at this, yards were destroyed. East India Company further issued orders on 1st August 1814, which forbade traders from ships built in India. So now they are clamping down on traders. So mariners are different, traders are different. And they are saying traders cannot come from India with ships built in India. So with this act, shipbuilding in India itself was quashed. Indian shipwrights.
As I understand, there were about 40,000 ships at that time made in.
Yes, absolutely. So look at that. So 40,000 ships from for the whole maritime coast of India, and the whole backbone to prepare those ships, the shipwrights, the people who, the mariners, the traders, everybody, by one stroke of a pen, the whole trade industry was made jobless. What will happen? They're all within a generation will become poor. And they all become Shudra. You look at how it has all worked out.
And along with this, look at what do they do. On one hand, they squash the trade. So they don't allow things from here to go out. And on the other hand, see here what they're doing. The British manufactured goods were imported into India at 2.5% duty. So such a small duty, whereas other foreign goods, Dutch were imported into India at 15% duty. So they made a discrimination between them and the other Europeans. Indian manufactured goods like calico, muslin, iron were exported at 400% duty. So fundamentally, this civilization for millennia, we have seen Angus Madison reports of GDP being 30%.
Now look at this. People today speak about fair trade. UN has got fair trade policy. Is it fair trade? Look at this. The whole trading community was,
according to Britishers, everything was fair in love and war, and this was a war of their survival. So there's no question of fair. We decide and we make rules and we impose and you just carry it out. And I think if they don't carry it out, then they have guns there. So it boils down to that very simple mechanics there.
And look at the word fair itself. No, just pause for a minute, Dr. Saab. Look at the word fair itself. Look at the word fair itself means you're fair-skinned or you're dark-skinned. The word fair itself is a very colonial word to differentiate people.
I see. Got it.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a very important point there. So the very terminology fixes it.
So with this, most of our industries, the cotton trade. So no Indian could own ships, no Indian could ferry using ships, no Indian could trade. Then no Indian manufactured goods could be traded. So all the entire production, which was the Shudra community, the Shudra community was the backbone of the civilization of all the production, and the Shudra and the Vaishya for the trade. These two are being totally strangled. Literally with all this, it's like an octopus grip from all sides. They were kind of crippling these two communities.
Actually, we made this image to show how like an octopus, they squeezed every side of it through laws they brought in.
So actually this Radha Kamal Mukherjee, who was a leading thinker, And in who lived between 1889 and 1968, he says, thus has passed out one of the great national industries of India after a long and brilliant history covering a period of more than 20 centuries. It was undoubtedly one of the triumphs of the Indian civilization, the chief means by which that civilization asserted itself and influenced other alien civilizations. There can hardly be conceived a more serious obstacle in the path of her industrial development than this almost complete extinction of her shipping and shipbuilding, because along with this, our entire industries also.
All industries collapsed with it.
And look at how these industries, some of these industries had collapsed. We'll just show you a very brief.
The same point on Ballala is also there in the book for you to read.
So these were some of the aspects that they took over, they broke down. One, they annexed land freely. So whatever land anybody didn't claim, they would call it, they had a rule called the terra nullius. So if there was nobody who could produce a document for their land, then that land was taken away by the British. And the civilization was designed such that there were large tracts of land which were commonly owned land.
By
like
the community.
Like the gauchers. You only owned your home.
And your field.
And your field. But beyond that, a lot of it was common land.
Owned by the samudaya, that is a community.
So all those were taken away by terra nullius. The forests were taken away by terra nullius, because which tribe can produce their document for the forest? So who owned the forest? So the forests were all taken away. And that is one of the reasons why, if you see, we're jumping, we're doing it very, very quickly, but this is a real heart-wrenching story that is tied up in that's got many loose ends that you have to tie to get the full picture. See, many people say that the freedom struggle of India started in 1857. And but actually, if you see, there are so many freedom struggles much before 1857. And of course, after is well documented in our history books. But people don't talk about many of these previous ones. And all these Santal uprisings that we talk about, the 10,000 Santals. And look at this at Vellore, then Alluri Sita Ramaraju.
In Andhra
Pradesh. Two brothers, Mallu Dora, Gantam Dora. Guerrilla warfare among the thick valley forests. So before 1857, if you look at it, of course, again, if you look at each of these, the description will be something else. But the root cause is the tribals, the people in the forest, the Vanavasi actually, who are fighting against the British to protect their forests, to ensure that the forests are not denuded, they are not taken away. And these are the uprisings which eventually lead to the 1857.
So look at the point one. See, what do you remember?
The Brahmapur, the Paika revolution in Odisha.
But all the Odisha ones. Look at all from the people who were disenfranchised in different ways, each one of them. And this is all India, not in one place. So what we normally hear about is the 1857 of Mangal Pandey and others. So this is what we sort of get to read, but we don't get to read. There's so many more that happened all over India, and every part of India. We just shown you a bullet of all over, right from Manipur to Assam to everywhere you have got this. So the point, what I'm saying, it was the people who revolted. Why did they revolt? Because they were systematically, one after another, were made jobless. So they fought for their rights. That was the difference that you see. Whereas, look at the one point here. Such a revolution, suppose I'm saying very pertinent point here, Dr. Saab. Suppose the people were earlier in civilization, supposedly the Shudras were pressed under the foot of some upper caste or something, we would have had such revolutions repeatedly every century in the history of India.
Not against the British, but you would have had them against the Brahmins, against the Kshatriyas.
And the kings. But you don't have any recorded history of anywhere such uprisings in the long millennia of history of India. There were no uprisings at all. There were no social caste uprisings. Why is it so? This is a pertinent point we should ask, because they were not subjudicated. They were all treated similarly, equally by as a Samaj. So this sort of appraising happened only during British times, all across the land. So that itself tells you a story which is unique. We should pause to think that the civilization never had such appraisings all across the land.
Now look at this. Then they're taking over of trade, which we just saw with the navigation shipping thing. Taking over water rights. This is one of the fundamental things that they did, especially after the 1857. See, what was, we very rarely acknowledge this particular community, which is the Odda Jati. The Odda Jati, the word itself, Od, comes from waters. So this was a Jati that was very highly skilled in managing all kinds of water-related works. All kinds of civil works that were connected with water, be it with stone, be it with mud. And this community
Dr.
actually...
Pankaj Parekh, would you know of any one lady of this community who is popular even now after a millennia?
You will have to make me familiar with that.
I'm sure you would have heard of her. I'm sure you would have heard of her. If we show you her painting.
Jasma Oden.
The name is not familiar. My exposure to that.
I'm sorry, because she is a folklore among the Gujaratis.
Gotcha.
Jasma Oden.
I see.
She's a folklore, and she's one of the most beautiful ladies of the Gujarati community.
Who actually came to build the Vav, Rani Ki Vav.
Rani Ki Vav. She was one of the
ladies
yes. Rani Ki Vav.
And she refused to succumb to one of the noble over there, the king there. And that's the story. But it just shows that, and they are there all across this land. Any region you go, there are various names in Andhra, in Karnataka, in Kerala, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Odia.
You
This
mean
is
Priyanka?
one
Hold on. Priyanka Vadra is connected with this?
That's a good one, sir.
And I do have my classmate called Vadar, and I think that may come from the similar extension.
Yes.
See, all the Vad, Ud, Udayar.
And look at the shipbuilders of India. That was the family, the Wadia family. That is also Vadia. Vadi, the word Vadi means dry channels which run with water during rains. And you have so many Kurdwadi and so many places, Wadi in almost every city and state.
Especially Maharashtra.
And
very common last
you have people who have done stone work, mud work.
See,
and all this, what happened in 1857. So these were the people. And you again, there is yet another loose end that you have to connect. How were these people being paid? Were they rich? Of course they were. They were very rich. Today, today it's very sad. I feel very bad when I look at it. Sometimes you look at some matrimonial columns and you will find these under scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, because they'll say that I'm Kallu Bhovi or a Mannu Bhovi, and we're looking for a bride and so on. But these people today, they are scheduled and they hardly have any income, and economically they are at the lowest strata. But those days, from the harvest, we are going to be celebrating Shankranti, the harvest festival. From the harvest, it was an rule all across the civilization that you had to set aside 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Where is it in agriculture?
Yeah, 1/3 of, I will show you, 1/3 of the produce was given to the people who provided water for you. That was what it was.
So
look at this. 1/3 of the produce was for the landowner. 1/3 was for the water provider. 1/3 was for the tiller. So just because landed gentry did not get more value, the tiller got equal. The person who toiled on your soil, he got equal share. And the person who provided water to your farm got equal share. So all the wards, Wadi, Ud, Ud. So look at that. They were getting 1/3 of the produce all over the land, and their job was to ensure that every field got water.
There is
Isn't
so
it?
much.
So
Only
where
so-
is hierarchy in this?
So
Where is hierarchy
equitable,
in this caste system?
so equitable distribution, and I can imagine
Absolutely.
each one of them would have so much reason to give their heart and mind and the body to do what they need to do, so that the outcome is the best. That I can imagine that.
Absolutely. But in 1857, what did they do?
Yes, once again, Mr. Suresh asked about this. Yes, probably because, yeah, about Guhan, yes. Guhan, what you say is quite right. So that's also that. I agree with you. So all these people were all, and they're all dealing with water. And why is water called Ud? Anybody? Pause for a moment. And any of you have come across a water with the name starting with Ud? It's a very special Russian water.
Also French, right?
Vodka. Vodka.
That's all, you got it. Vodka.
Can imagine.
Look at the word vodka. Where does it come from? This word ud. It's after distilled water, isn't it? It's a Russian water, of course. Udita Tiwari ji, yes, we have written in our book Indo-Russia about this with proof. So every time people drink vodka, you should know that the roots of the word vodka is from India.
But there is
It's
a
an
big
Indian
difference.
word.
But there is a big
So-
difference between vodka and water. Let's not misunderstand.
So no, that is two waters. One is ud is a water.
I understand.
Ka is also water. Ka comes from aqua.
I got your point. I see. That is what is
So
translated.
the two waters. So when you mix two waters, it's a lot more potent.
Got your point. Understandable.
So in 1857, see, water was is very important for the civilization, because you get rains very seasonally for 3 months, 4 months. And for the rest of the year, you have to hold on to these waters and use them judiciously, because this civilization also had 3 bhogs, 3 harvests. Even today we have. So the waters have been managed beautifully by this jati, the Odda jati. And in 1857, all these water harnessing systems, to break the backbone of the civilization after the Mangal Pandey 1857 uprising, the British took over all these water bodies from the communities. So they took control and they prevented people from managing it the way they were doing it, using all these rules and this community.
So the way the shipwrights and the shipping industry was destroyed, we saw by the law, the Calcutta Gazette, etc. We saw too. So it was done after 1857. You know what they did? They said, "Okay, you people are trying to fight against us. We'll break your backbone. Where is your backbone? In water harnessing." So by a law called Public Works Department Act, PWD Act, they took over all the water bodies of the land in one shot. That's what happened. Look at that.
And
After that,
our experience with PWD, when that word comes, that's a sure way. Even after independence, that's a sure way of destroying whatever is existing.
Yes,
so I can imagine before that what must have happened.
so, and who owned all this? All the community owned water bodies were taken away by a governmental body who had no knowledge as how to manage it, and sitting in some files in a daftar, they controlled all the water bodies. So that is how, again, a community across the land were made jobless, penniless, and made to Shudra.
So from benefactors, they become beggars. They have nothing now to do. Where will they apply their skills? What will they do now? Who needs their skills?
Obviously, keep in mind that this is not an era of a social security. There is no question of relocating the jobs. There is no question of government assistance. The government, which is bent on breaking their back, has no interest in assisting. They would like them to be roaming around jobless, homeless, without any education or anything. So no wonder the whole communities and masses. And if it happens within 5-10 years, I mean, their children may be able to recoup something. But on the other hand, when it's over generations, over 1 or 2 generations is gone, then the whole, even the knowledge system is destroyed, so that the subsequent generation is not able to pick up nothing of that at all.
Absolutely. So that's why we have written this. Look at this para heading we written here. It's called breaking the backbone of Shudras. Literally. So if it was somebody who destroyed the whole vibrant, prosperous community in trade guild after trade guild, it was by British state policy. And they were become impoverished only for this reason. There's no doubt about it. So we're taken.
So similarly, the cotton industry was destroyed. Each of this
Kapas.
is a story. And the other cash crop, which was the indigo dyes, this industry also lost its relevance with chemical dyes coming into usage and in vogue world over. So one industry after industry, all the industries which were literally the cash cow for the civilization, which were bringing in all the wealth, which were contributing to overall GDP, each of these were broken. So with that, the entire layer, that strata actually becomes irrelevant in society in that sense.
See,
And,
which
and
was the most
let us go to the fact how, when they become irrelevant, how they enter into the so-called untouchables which we have witnessed. I think
Now
since our
we
timing
will
is
show
tight,
you.
you can move into that direction when you feel like.
Yes, absolutely. So now look at what happens. We will take, I mean, we have written about all the
Because
other
as I
industries as
understand,
well.
the original Indian system does not have even concept of untouchability at some stage. And the question
it
is,
did
or
not.
if it was there, it was in a minor way. What created such a large population, which in a so-called, not only they were in a very impoverished, very uneducated, they were forced to consume meat and other aspects, sort of, because they didn't have a choice and access to the reasonable food. Whatever areas that you feel that contributed to the so-called untouchable system.
so meat consumption was there prevalent in India. So let's not deny that. But consumption of cow meat, beef was extremely low. So that was the shift that happened, that created, because that is one thing you should remember. And untouchability was actually practiced a lot more by the people in the Vana, the forest. And because they didn't want clearly the infection of the Grama Nagara to be passed on to the pure people living in the Vana. Today, what we do, we call these Vanava, they actually Vanava, the way you have the word Gramavasi, people living in the village, you have Nagaravasi, people living in the towns, Vasa, Divas, Gramavasi. Similarly, you had something called Vanavasi, people living in the forest. And all that is a noble term, because they collectively, the whole group owned the forest. They looked after the forest as much as the tiger looked after the forest. The Vanavasi looked after the forest because that is where their produce was, their living was, that was their world. What happened? The way they took out the water bodies, they also took out the forest by a forest act. And they took out the forest, and then they didn't come under your four Varna. They came beyond the four Varna. So that's why they were called Panchama. Because
actually, there's a very interesting word, See, you have the English word shanty, right? Shanty towns and shanty, those kind of temporary structures, temporary markets. And if you look at it, most of these shanties will be at the peripheries of forests where you still have people, and today at least. And in earlier days, definitely there were many more. So these were junctions. They were actually, the word comes from Sandhi. So these
Sandhya.
were
Look at the word Sandhya for morning and evening, when the sun meets the sky. Okay, at the horizon, we call it Sandhya, right? So that's why the word Sandhi, so joining point.
These were places, points where people from the Vana and people from the Nagara could come and exchange. So the forest produce would reach the people here. And mind you, when these forest people, Vanavasi, would go back, they had very clear norms. We have written about it separately in another book. They had to isolate themselves. Today, after all the COVID, we have seen these kind of isolations. But this is a forest practice which is there even today.
Hemaji, to make it relevant, you know that a large number of originals in US and in Southern America were wiped out after the Britishers introduced plague and many other illnesses. It's exactly similar reason where there was one of the reason for extinction of Red Indians
Yes.
here is one of that is that the introduction of foreign diseases which they could not handle, which may be as simple as flu. It may be as simple as flu to as hard as syphilis and plague, for which there was nothing available. So I think it makes sense that people in a certain group needed to be in their own environment and avoid that interactions of that sort that can bring diseases. It is a possibility in that sense.
Absolutely. Since you, Dr. Pankaj Parikh, since you mentioned syphilis, I'll tell you, syphilis was a disease introduced into Goa, into India by the Portuguese. Before that, the syphilis disease was not there. Either the texts are available to say that they did not have disease at all. It was introduced into Goa by the Portuguese.
I can imagine.
So this is the terra nullius rule, which has played havoc. So any land which was found vacant, and if they couldn't produce document, then they were taken over by the British, and therefore they were thus alienated in their own lands. And there was also, by government law, they were forced out and moved into the cities as part of being accommodated.
And where will they get accommodated? Into the towns and villages in the periphery.
Because now look at it, already the towns and villages, the existing community which is producing, they themselves don't have work. They are wallowing in poverty. On top of that, you get these people from all the forests who have been thrown out, and they cannot fit into city life because they don't know the ways of city life. They don't know the hygienes. They don't wear clothes. Their eating food habits are different. So what are they going to be called? They are going to be called untouchables. They are going to be kept aside. They are going to be called the outcasts.
Yes, the Spanish, everything happened like this. So across the land, look at this, how it all changed in 200 years. A millennia old system, which was smooth and functioning system, was convoluted and changed into hierarchical system wherein they were alienated own land. Can any of you think of one other place where terra nullius rule was implemented with an iron fist in another part of the world?
In Australia, yes, I saw that.
So all the aborigines who actually owned the land, but collectively owned the land, terra nullius was imposed on them. So they were in their own land, they were made landless. They owned the whole continent.
So this is how you find untouchability creeping in. While untouchability was practiced in small measures and restricted only to the Vanavasis, and for keeping them safe and the forest safe, it takes on a different turn when they start pouring into the cities because their forests are being taken, and in the cities they cannot be accommodated anywhere because their ways of life is very different. Then the untouchability takes on a very negative connotation.
Can I tell you one point here? She can go back one slide and then tell you. I'll just say one point and go back. No. Do you know, even today in India, we practice untouchability in one particular place by Supreme Court law. Presently practiced today in India. This is in the Andaman forest, the Jarawa tribes. You can't go touch them at all by Supreme Court law. They are really untouchable. You cannot, because you may transmit your disease to them. By law today, you can't touch them. You can't eat in front, because you may eat a pan, something in front of them, because you may pass on a bad habit to them. You can't smoke in front of them. You can't consume alcohol. So they've kept them clean because they should not be polluted by our society. They are pure. And look at the word Jarawa. The word Jara means old age, old. And who is the hunter who fells Sri Krishna? Name of the hunter?
Jara.
Mr.
Jara.
Really?
Jara. So the question to you, all of you, is: was he felled by a hunter by name Jara, or was he felled by Jara, old age?
As I understand, he was almost 125 years or so at that time there.
81.
So yes,
We would say 81. We have clearly said in the book he has 81 plus.
Oh, got your point.
It could not have been one, because if you say he's 125, there are a few hundred more people who will be in the same age group as him or older than him. So we can't have a body of many of your doctors, you know, you can't have a body of many hundred people who are in their 140s and 150s and 160s.
And going and fighting wars, battles.
Understand.
I mean, we have dealt with this in great detail in our book, Historical
Krishna, as to what.
So fundamentally, I mean, just to summarize, these are some of the key reasons why this particular community became poor, and today they are economically at the lower levels. And it is not because they were suppressed or oppressed by the higher, there is no such thing called the higher caste, no caste firstly. So there was nothing like a higher varna, lower varna either.
Because it was not vertical, it was horizontal. See, fundamentally, we show you one point. See, when people speak about that sukta, they say everybody speaks about it. No, I just go to this one point to explain to us with simple clarity. Just show you one slide here. Look at this slide. See, people talk about it. No, only when you say vertical, it is like this, vertical like Vishnu. So Vishnu is shown vertical, whereas Narayana is always shown supine, horizontal. So it is Narayana Sukta, horizontal, where you got this about this four. Yeah, Purusha Sukta is all about that four. Okay, when you speak about Narayana. Whereas, see, Vishnu is vertical, whereas Narayana is horizontal. When you have horizontal. So look at that. When you say Purusha Sukta, when you say speak about this, it's not vertical. You see it horizontal. So do you get the picture? So it is a horizontal system, and it is not only caste, it is jati, varna, ashrama. Ashrama is the third point, and all three put together matrix comes this, and it's not religion based. It is societal based. This we deal a lot more in when we do the course, or we can do of the ashram also if you want on another day. Only on this three-angle matrix, which is, and caste was oversimplified and made vertical because it was a vertical system in Europe from where the colonists came from. I hope that clarity comes, because we almost touched 1 hour and more. So I wanted to bring in this point of clarity.
Yes, let's go through. If we did give some understanding of the creation of large masses of people into the so-called such a poor category that become a category by itself. It doesn't mean whether they belong to Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra. Obviously, Vaishya and Shudra took a brunt of role because they were squeezed the most, and they become in such an impoverished state that becomes sort of a big difference between the people who could maintain themselves well because of variety of reasons, while the people who were on the roads and out there, and that created such a big imbalance and introduced that there could certainly be a composition of some or component of some say Brahmins or other people who trying to accentuate that difference either regionally or at some other places. But was this, it did over the last couple of 100 years ago, there was a sizable introduction and feeling that there is a difference between the two extremes of population in the nation. But I think some of your writings that we saw from both, we did not highlight as much of the Saurashtra person that we were planning to talk a little bit about that. But I think we did mention both Valahar in the south, but how the Britisher in Saurashtra decimated the whole population. I do have that screen if I can bring it out briefly before we go to the question answers. Let me get that particular part.
Dr. Alexander Walker, who has got the sobriquet of Butcher of Saurashtra.
Yes, and I should have that particular part.
Yes.
It's there in our book, and it's there as a caption also. We have it. Dr. Alexander Walker.
Yes, and this is his
Brigadier General, not Dr. Brigadier General Alexander Walker, who did this about 200 years ago.
Right. So that was a small component which I thought that you may want to bring it
Yes,
out.
definitely.
There it is, the British note.
Yes,
Brigadier Alexander Walker.
here it is. That was his writing, that the spirit of inquiry and
Oh, am I
liberty.
sharing?
No, one
One
second.
second,
We'll just
I'll-
share screen. 1 second, please. We got the slide. We'll just share screen, please.
Sure, please.
Sorry.
Because it is very hard for the contemporary people to even feel that Shudra were richer in the community, Shudra were well settled in the community. By and large, the feeling goes that, oh, we didn't know nothing.
So look at what this person, who he's Brigadier General Alexander Walker, and he is called the Butcher of Saurashtra because he waged wars on this for about 30 years to finally succeed in annexing Saurashtra for the British. And during these years, he studies this that region so well, and then he writes, no people probably appreciate more justly the importance of instruction than the Hindus.
I mean, teaching, education.
They sacrifice all the feelings of wealth, family, pride, and caste that their children may have the advantage of good education. So he's saying about how the people of India were very keen on getting educated and they would sacrifice anything for good education. And this love of learning was no exclusive characteristic of the Brahmins, but this desire is strongly impressed on the minds of all the Hindus. Spirit of inquiry and of liberty, most by the Sudurs. So Sudurs is his
Shudra.
spelling of Shudras. Most by the Sudurs who compose the great body of population and who were in possession of the principal authority and property of the country, both authority and property of the country. And look at this, he is writing from Western India, in Saurashtra.
Rajkot. He's sitting in Rajkot and writing this.
And he's saying almost the same thing that Bartholomew Ziegenbach has said about
Malabar.
South India and how the community here in South India, they are in possession of the wealth.
And the same thing that the other person, British Thomas Munro, says from Bellary, Central Karnataka. The same thing that is said in Srirampur Mission by Adams
In Bengal.
in Bengal. Look at everybody across the land is saying the same thing. That means what the similar
I mean,
and all
you
around
know,
150, 200 years ago.
As I mentioned you earlier in my personal talk, when I mentioned you that last night I had a long discussion with one of our colleagues from Baroda, and I think he's not there on this script, but he was hard pressed to believe that Shudras were anything but the so-called Shudra as we understand, or Harijans as we understand. This would be the eye-opening that there were factual written information about the so-called Shudra who were so well placed in the society rather than at the bottom, as we call it. So I think this understanding is very hard for many of my colleagues to digest and even accept that this is what was the truth there. But let us move forward. I think we have done a long way here. Let me open the forum for a few questions that we might have it at the moment. I know many more things could be discussed, but I wish we had time. And the untouchability is always the question, and I know it is at the heart of that. When did the untouchables not to enter temple start, and how did it start? Would you have that answer? I think that is very at the heart of many of us. We know that Gandhi had to break that block in the temples for the untouchables. At some roughly what stage this might have started? Was it at 500,000? When was this that untouchables had so-called untouchables had difficulty in entering?
You mentioned one thing. Gandhi broke the system to get untouchables into temples, is what you're saying.
Yes.
But let me take 2-3 examples which I read. I don't know whether I read them today or yesterday or 2 days back. Look at examples of the people who brought back the so-called untouchables back into the temples. It was the Brahmins in different places. Actually, this was from a social media post by one person speaking about this, and they said, so it was a very ill-informed social media post for which another person replied. He said, this was a so-called Shudra who replied actually, who said, no, it was all in every place across India, to the Brahmins who led us by hand and took us back into the temple. Be it by Veer Savarkar in Ratnagiri, or in Malabar, or be it in Tamil Nadu, or be it in Andhra, Odisha, it was they who took us, because the other point is, see, temple is not for everybody. It doesn't have the same variety of temple prayers, what you should understand. That's again a very Western thought. A temple for a Shakta religious person is different from a temple for a Vaishnava different person. So you may not go into the temple at all. That's not your place of worship. So for example, if you say that I should be allowed into your place of worship, that's a different matter. But the point is, when the issue came, they took them, because each one had a particular variety of this. We speak in our book on Ayyappa, how there's people called Ayyanar temples. The people who worship that deity go to that temple.
Brahmins, in fact, are not allowed there.
Into the Ayyanar temple, because it is not their divinity. Like that, there are different varieties of people, different divinities. So the British thought the Hindu temple, they created the term Hinduism, and they created Hindu common temple, and then they brought everybody into it. Now they are saying, you know what? Hindu temples are secular, anybody can go into it. Why only Hindus?
Can we start question answer session now?
Yes, sir.
I think so.
But just complete this.
Can I start? Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go
Yes,
ahead.
sir. Yes.
So the point is that the Vanavasis had their Kavu, K-A-V-U, Kavu means they had their forest temples. That was you had Vanashankari, which is now Banshankari, is a famous suburb of Bengaluru. So you had so many temples in the forest where the forest dwellers went to. So they had their own religious temples. People who follow different, and Hinduism is not one religion. Hinduism is made of 6 religions called Shad Mada. So each of them had the temples. So to say that you want a variety to go to, the people who practice variety 1 of Shadmada should go to variety 6 of Shadmada temples. That is again a thing that took time. So to say that we barred is a different point. They don't understand the whole gamut of it. But when it became Hinduism, became one aggregated form, it was the Brahmins all over the land who actually took the so-called Shudra by hand into the temple, repeatedly all over. And this has been recorded by the template system itself, which was actually pointed out to me 2 days back in social media by some other person. It was not because of Gandhiji's movement. It was much before that.
Gotcha point.
Independent of that.
Let
Can
me
I
have
share
a
an observation,
question.
please?
Kishorji, you had a question if you wish.
Yeah, let me start. So one thing that comes to my memory is the incident that Adi Shankaracharya faced a Chandal. So if we are saying that this came after the British colonization, then how would you interpret that particular incident?
Yes. See, there was a question of hygiene. Here, based on the question of hygiene. See, for example, a hygiene factor is different from a birth factor. And that is why he asked him, you want my body or my soul? So and this is what we bring out also there. See, the moment you go into poverty, you also go into non-hygiene. So it was a hygiene factor that was, because this has been raised umpteen times with people. But the point is, when was this? And if you same thing, if you take Ramanujacharya, 1000 years back, the other great Acharya, when he used to bathe and come back with his different disciples, he used to put his arm around people of other jati and come after bathing, because they're all bathed together. They went to the mandir straight after bathing in the Kaveri river. And that is there in our blog written with the names of the different people, different jati with whom he put his arm around them and walked, because he lived up to the age of 120. So he took the assistance of people and walked with them to the temple. So that was there. So the hygiene is a big factor you should keep in mind.
Very good. I see Chris Mittalji's hand was up for a while.
I just like to share observation and also a question for that matter related together. What I'm noticing today in India, for example, the last name has become your caste. Whether you're Sharma, then you are a Brahmin. If you are a Mittal, you are or Agarwal, you are a Vash. Okay, whatever. It's all over India now. But my observation is that until the 1920s, that was not the case. I mean, the people did not use last name. My great grandfather was named Ramratan. My grandfather was named Noharla.
in the entire village, people just had two names. They did not have a last name. 1920s, the British started, because they created this education system and they are hiring the babus, and they started sometime maybe before 1920s hiring, and they have to, the application you have to put a last name, surname, and people had to search for a surname, and they put whatever they thought were right, and that has today become their caste. Everybody is using a last name now.
Very
Why?
true, sir. Very true.
Very true, and that's my
Very
observation,
true. In our
that
case, we
that
don't use
caste,
our caste. Very true.
irrespective of what your jati is or what your varna is, what profession you are chosen today, you may be a clerk, but you are called Brahmin if you are a Sharma. And that kind of thing is wrong, because that has become so frozen. And based on, I heard of an incident that in Bombay about 20, 30, 40 years ago, somebody had to complete an application and he has to find his caste. What is your caste? Because now there are reservations for castes and all that kind of thing. So he had to go to his village to find what his caste was. That kind of thing
That is
would become a
interesting.
curse for India for good, because it was created by the British. But the current governments all over India are still using it, and that's a shame.
Well, the politicizing of the caste has been a big issue, and we wanted to discuss that, but we realized that we need to create this base so that discussion can happen. Ramji, you had a question. Please go ahead.
So, Hariji and Hemaji, whom I had the pleasure of meeting in November, I have one request for getting a clarification. So, when the four Varnas were identified, there was a sequence of rules. So, for example, that Brahmins cannot have wealth, the people who are Kshatriyas would basically protect, and then the Vaishyas would possibly supply to all of them. Can you throw some light on because it is like a cross check for all four of them?
Yeah. See, again, Brahmins cannot have wealth is again a misnomer.
Oh,
it's again a very Anglican misnomer. All can have wealth because this is a wealthy land, prosperous land. All can enjoy wealth. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, all can have Artha. Again, Brahmins cannot have Artha. Wealth is again because they are also landed gentry. They also work in the field. Up to my great grandfather in my family, they could tie their langoti and get into the field and grow rice and all that. So it was there very clearly.
See, there are cases where they have been gifted with cows, they have been gifted with land. What would they do? I mean, even that was their wealth, that was their means of sustaining themselves.
And working the land was both men and women. Even women pulled up their sari, hitched it up, and then they started working the field, doing all that. So that was a common thing. So it was not again gender-based. That's one. And all of them did many things. And when it went to war, it was all hands to the deck. And all of them were trained in good warfare, basic self-defense. Because in every Gurukula, every Pathasala, you had self-defense were taught. After all, the karate, kung fu, all that has its origins from India.
So
all the martial arts have,
this is another Hariji, this is another topic by itself, which we are going to get at some stage, because last night, the gentleman that I spoke to, he had a hard time believing the sentence that I quoted from you, that before Britishers, the Indian literacy rate was about 50%. And when they left, it was something like 5% plus minus. And he says, good God, can you get me that proof? But we'll bring that topic by education in India at some stage. I think we have a question. Raviji, please go ahead, and if you have a question.
Sir, can I just interrupt you for 1 second if you don't mind?
Sure.
What your friend asked you in 2020 was asked by a person named Sir Philip Hartog in East England to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, then in 1930s, and when he was in the Chatham House, and he was asked to prove the same point what we said here, and it was because after Gandhi didn't have the time to go when he came back to India to answer to respond with facts. So it fell upon, or a Gandhian took it upon himself by name Sri Dharampal Ji, and he wrote a book called The Beautiful Tree, and which we have extensively quoted in that in our book Breaking the Myths About Society.
And so what was the literacy rate? What was the literacy rate according to his assessment?
A lot more than 50%.
Really?
And we both had the singular honor of about 20 years back sitting with Dharampal Ji in his cot I literally sat with him in on his cot by his bedside. And my wife Hema sat on the footstool by him, and we listened to him personally one-on-one in his last year of his life. Okay. And we got personal first-hand data from, because he scored all the records for 50 years and collected all that, and he's brought out a book called The Beautiful Tree. And this
Many
is
contemporary literate Indians have a hard time to believe that we were literate at some
Yes.
point in this society.
Yes.
I'm not joking. I was scolded
Agree with you,
yesterday
sir.
that Dr. Pavik, are you sure? Are you in your mind telling that India was a literate country? But Kishorji, since you are in a university setup, I invite you to explore that education part and moderate that with
Yes.
Hariji's next time. And I can get one more person in US who is also involved in this particular aspect. And we could have a session by itself for literacy in India. But I think Raviji or somebody had a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, namaskar, and hello, all of you. Namaskar. So I'm a pandit. I mean, Pathak is pandits, Path padhane wala pandits, and my ancestors, we're all Brahmins, and we were very well off. We were gifted so many lands, and we had mutts, elephants, horses, until Indira Gandhi took away the lands from the land reforms. And also we had Ganges. She has the habit of changing her routes, and she started flowing into our lands, so we lost. But otherwise, yes, we were at one point of time very, very wealthy. But and then my father had to come with one iron suitcase to IIT Madras and then start from scratch. And today I'm what I am. But yeah, so to judge that gentleman, Pandits and Brahmins were prosperous, very prosperous at one point of time.
Why did people donate? Sir, Ravi Pathak ji made a good point. I'm going to ask you a question now.
Yes,
why
please.
did people donate to Brahmins?
They felt it was their building their karma, probably, and they good deed.
Yes.
Because
Good deed,
they
why?
didn't want Brahmins
Why
to do they wanted the Brahmins to do what they are doing, that Pandits, doing pujas and
what? No, puja is one side. Puja is a very small aspect of the Brahmins.
It is to me. It is to me a reverence to someone who has empowered you with a knowledge, who has helped
Correct.
you grow in your life. So it's a gratitude to that
Yes.
knowledge, gift of knowledge.
And also the culture, and the culture was there to give. People were having abundance was there. And people if I had a banana farm today and Hariji and Hemaji came to my house, you think what I will give them? Lot more bananas. so there was abundance at that point of time. So
You
people
can,
gave.
Hari is, you can give bananas to Hari. Hari also means, what?
Hari also means, she said Hari means monkey.
I know. I would not say that.
Probably where his sweetness comes from there. He's always smiling, and I see that bananas have a tendency to make you smile. So who knows it?
I just have one point, sir, because what she Ravi Pathak will say. See, we were a knowledge society. We were a knowledge commune. That's why we are prosperous. So the community decided that knowledge people should not be disturbed to do other vocations. Give them what they need, so they are focused on knowledge continuation, knowledge creation, and knowledge sustenance. So that is why you are a knowledge community. America did well 100 years back because they decided to become a knowledge community. There were knowledge cities. For example, in West Germany, Bonn was a knowledge town. Berlin was a commercial capital, like that. See, everywhere. So knowledge was given focus primacy. So the people who were pursuing knowledge were ensured that they had sufficient wherewithal so that they can focus on knowledge and not worry about the next meal.
Well, I mean, it would always be there, right? That, I mean, we are saying that if you give somebody a fish, you can keep him alive for a day, but if you teach him fishing. So, I mean, any human being would have a gratitude to somebody who has empowered you with a knowledge in a variety of ways. As a physician, I know how much I still enjoy getting something, and at the moment we are getting from you all this information and knowledge. So there is an information, there is a knowledge, there is a techniques. So that is how the gratitude is built. And I think a man without gratitude is not a man by himself, if you ask me. So you lose being a human. Let's see who else has a question there.
I have a couple of questions on the chat. So one question was, why can't this be taught in Indian schools? And the second question is, a small number of Britishers could control all this. Who were the masterminds of all these laws that took away?
The first is relevant, and I'll add it up to what Hariji would say. But this is the reason for such forums. Sharing of this information, the so-called Indian perspective or Indian narrative. And I know
Can we hear from the guests, please?
Yes. Hariji, go ahead.
Yeah. See, when we started 25 years back, it was very difficult, but still we started. Now the system is a lot more open and conducive for people to receive this knowledge. Of course, it's still not percolated into the official system of the NCERT books. Unfortunately, not yet, but we hopefully it will happen in the next few years, if not a lot more years. We expect it to happen. Many people are working towards it in their own ways. So to make it happen, to bring this knowledge into mainstream, because this has been in the fringe periphery with knowledgeable people, with dharmic people for decades and decades. Unfortunately, because we had taken up after independence a wrong path of unfortunate secularism, which made us sick. I say SICK, secularism. And we had also taken on a system that was alien to the land, namely socialism. Instead, we should focus on humanism, which is a dharmic variety. So we took two major wrong folks. We took us 70 years of our time and split not only our nation but also our minds. So at least now we're trying to make the mend, and the mend is happening from the public. So it is now, what was a trickle a few decades ago is now gathering steam, and hopefully over the next coming decade it will pick up a lot more force. And that is why when we brought out these books, Autobiography of India, we thought the title, actually we thought that the naming of the title itself was a bit audacious. What audacity do we have to write Autobiography of India is what we thought. Then we said, if we as Bharata Putra or Bharata Putri, if we can't pen our own story, who else can? That is why we termed it as Autobiography of India.
And what I'm seeing is that while you have given 25 years of life, the apathy of us Indians in our generation is so huge that it is hard to even convince people that this is worth reading, this is worth exploring, that such information, it is worth spreading for our generation and for future generation. So that at least that knowledge is there, that understanding is there, and then you act out. Life is lived today and in future. But so that is what we are struggling. But let's hope that we can empower a lot more people to do what we need to do.
Yeah. So
Any other question?
There was a second question, but before that, IIT Gandhinagar has a program, I think, to do more of this. And are you associated with that?
Yes, most IITs have started, sir, because 10 years back, if you had spoken to the IITs, IIMs, they would not agree. Now, all IITs have opened up this branch and now speaking humanities. And now the good point is, last week there was a discussion in IIT Chennai of opening something called Center for Indian Knowledge System, IKS, in all IITs, though in a small way. So probably they'll open it in the year 2022. And we were called for the discussion and they want us to be part of that group and all those things. So in the coming decade of the 2020s, we will have this Indian knowledge system in all major institutions of India. So there is a Government of India program, and we are working with some of the people, officials who are working there. We're in talks with them. So it must be a mass-based program. A governmental program is going to take time to happen, and we are working towards it. But if you ask me when it's happening at full steam, a lot of effort is being made. But India is a large country, and to move a large elephant around is going to take time.
Yeah.
We should also have the patience for it.
And there was an earlier question I had asked from the chat, which is that small number of British could control the large amount of land, but
Yes.
were there some masterminds?
Yes.
Who were the masterminds?
It's a good question, sir. I'm sure many of you would have seen this Richard Attenborough's film on Gandhi. Most of you would have seen it because you've not seen it about 20 years ago. The same dialogue comes in the film when Gandhi is walking in the supposed prison of Aga Khan Palace in Pune. It was not prison; it was actually a palace, but because Gandhi was kept there in it was not even solitary confinement, but so they called it a nomenclature called prison. There's a palace actually. So in the gardens when he's walking, this is a question asked of him, where he says hardly 10,000 Britishers ruling India, which includes India, Nepal, Pakistan, some parts of Afghanistan, Burma and
Bangladesh.
No, it's not Burma because 1937 Burma had become a different country. Bangladesh, all that put together, hardly about 10,000 plus Britishers in India. So that was, and this is known then also. That is why they left India. So this is what we written in our book, Breaking the Myths about ability. We written how it was not because of non-violence on Satyagraha that British left India. Attlee speaks about it in Bengal. When he's at the Chief Justice of Bengal's house, he makes a very pointed comment. He says that the British did not give independence to India because Gandhi asked for it. They gave it because the INA was coming back into India and the British could not withstand the INA and the World War II returnees who were armed and trained and equipped. So before they could rebel, the British thought it's better to leave India. And there's something called RNA. RAN. We written about RIN. We written about it in our book, and there's a statue for RIN in Mumbai. I don't know how many of you have seen it in Colaba. There's a full chapter in our book called RIN. Please read it.
Gotcha.
So they did not leave because of please go, please leave. No. There was a mortal fear in them. They could not control India. So that RIN, the mutiny happened on, I think, February 17th. And on February 18th, they announced that they leave India.